Okay, it's 9:05. I think we can start. I'm starting very slowly, so to let the other two join in the call. First of all, good morning to the participants, good morning to the panelists, and welcome to this final project event of the AEW Drones project. Here is Damiano Taurino. I'm the project coordinator of the AEW Drones project, and I would like to welcome you all to this session. Let's start with the very easy and simple logistic informations about the platform. We are lucky to have a high number of participants today, and we would like to thank you for this. On the other side, it means that the participants unfortunately would not be allowed to speak, because otherwise it could be a little bit hard to stay in the morning. But on the other side, from the participant, we want to get feedback and we want to interact with the participants. So you have the possibility to write down in the chat, and you have also the possibility to make questions. You should both have the chat window and the questions window. You can use both to ask for information and to ask for questions to the panelists and even general information. For any technical coordination, if you are experiencing problems and so on, please do not hesitate to write to Vera, that is the dissemination leader of the project, and she will be very glad to help you during the session. You can write her an email or write directly on the chat here in the platform. That would be even easier for her. We are very happy to have a number of panelists today, and I will introduce them as soon as it's their turn to speak. You have also here in the platform, you have the possibility to download the three main documents of this meeting, and in fact in the document section of GoToWebinar you will find the agenda of the event, and you can find two posters that support this meeting with a lot of information about the project and so on. There will be a lot of time during the meeting to talk about the project, so if you do not know anything about the AEW drones, don't worry, there will be a lot of time to know more about the project. And one of the main objectives of this meeting is to show you the main outcomes of this very interesting project that is coming to its end after 3 years of hard work. And together with this, we will also give you the insight of several important organizations about the integration of drones within their respective field of work. And there will be also the occasion to collect your feedback about some important questions and important topics around the domain of the drones and their integration within aviation and regulation. Okay, I think we can start, and now I would like to introduce you Mr. Christos Petrou. Is one of the members of the consortium with this FSF Med organization, but I will leave him the honor to introduce himself and this organization. He is the official organizer of this meeting that was originally planned to be held in Cyprus in presence, but unfortunately due to the very well-known situation, we switched this to an online event. So I will leave the floor to Christos for a brief introduction of himself, FSF Med, and also to this meeting. Good morning, Christos.
Good morning, Damiano. Good morning, everybody. I'm talking to you from Cyprus, and as I was telling our colleagues before, Today we have blue skies and the sun is shining. Therefore, it's a pity that we could not organize this event live in Cyprus with better weather, but I think we're going to have a very successful webinar. I'm the Executive Director of the Mediterranean Flight Safety Foundation. It's a non-governmental, non-profit organization established some 12 years ago in Cyprus with a lot of members, and our main objectives is to raise awareness about safety, aviation safety and security issues in the region of southeastern Mediterranean. We have organized a lot of events, and we had several training sessions. Of course, the last 2 years, because of the pandemic, we are not as active as we used to be. And we are very pleased to be part of the AW Drones project. For us, it was a valuable experience in many respects. First of all, we learned a lot about how a project, complex projects like this can be effectively managed. And I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate the program manager, Vladimir, and the project leader, Damiano, for the excellent work they have done in managing this project. It's really, they demonstrated excellent management and coordination best practices. But it's also a particular pleasure to us to be able to contribute to a new challenge in aviation, which is unlike the challenges we face so far. Let me give you some numbers. In 2019, that is before the pandemic, there were some 38 million flights globally, which transfer 4.5 billion persons. 38 million flights transporting 4.5 million persons. Yet, despite these staggering figures, we had very few accidents, and the air travel still remains the safest mode of transport. As we all know, for a flight to take place safely, a great number of people are engaged from different regions, different countries, aircraft manufacturers, international and regional organizations, pilots, engineers, air traffic controllers, regulators. Therefore, it is a very complex procedure for a flight to take place. And in order to take place in a safe way, it is absolutely necessary that everybody follows the same procedures, the same standards, and this is regulated. There is an oversight from international bodies like ICAO, from European bodies like EASA and EUROCONTROL and others. Now, as I said, drones is a new challenge, the use of drones and the continual increase of drones. It is an additional challenge and it needs to be addressed urgently. And this is recognized by everybody, you know, international organizations, manufacturers, airlines, everybody recognizes that this is a challenge. And one way to address this challenge is to do what it has been done in civil aviation the last 40, 50 years. That is to act in a coordinated manner with common procedures, common standards, common regulations. And this, of course, it was recognized by the European Commission, which very appropriately commissioned and financed these projects. We need also to implement EASA and ICAO for doing an excellent work in developing appropriate standards and regulations to that effect. Nevertheless, ladies and gentlemen, common regulations by themselves cannot address fully this challenge. What is also needed is a series of additional activities similar to those that they have been developed and are used successfully in managing commercial flights and which have contributed effectively in addressing the challenges of safety and security. Let me give you some examples. There is a need for an extensive public awareness campaign at global, regional, and national levels towards the general public, recreational and occasional drone users, as well as commercial clients. Air navigation service providers need to be involved in the development of the drone traffic management known as UTM, which is required to guarantee the safety for all airspace users, especially at boundaries, and ensure the interoperability between UTM and ATM systems for civil aviation flights. Also, there must be clear responsibilities between the relevant authorities at national level. There is also a need for registration of all drones and to find the most appropriate means to ensure positive identification of owners, operator, pilots, and observers. There is also the need to develop common systems by which it is possible to closely monitor the presence of drones in a regulated airspace, including anti-collision equipment, like we have the ACAS in civil aviation, to have a similar system when integrating drones in the existing ATM system. And of course, systematic safety data collection, the occurrence collection and analysis as we do in civil aviation. Of course, I'm certain that ICAO, EASA, and EUROCONTROL and other organizations have already identified these needs and possibly they're engaged already with them. Closing this short presentation, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to repeat that the use of drones constitutes a serious challenge for safety and security. It is very apparent that the AW Drones project will contribute effectively in meeting this challenge, and we would like to once more compliment and congratulate those that are involved in this project. Thank you for your attention.
And thank you very much, Christos. Thank you very much. And okay, I see that people are still logging in, but okay, we are warming up, so they are very welcome again to the webinar. Now I am very pleased to leave the floor for a presentation to our project officer from the European Commission, that is Mr. Vladimir Cid-Bourié. First of all, I would like to thank him very much for being here and also for all the support and very, very helpful hand he gave us during all the project. He has been more than a project officer for us. It has been a counselor. It has been also a member of the project because he gave us a lot of very good advices. And so I would like to thank him, and I will leave him the floor to say a couple of words about the program, the European program of R&D for drones and all the other domains that are of interest for his division. Good morning, Vladimir.
Good morning, Damiano. Thank you very much. And good morning to everybody. Thank you for the nice words. For me, it's been an honor for this more than 3 years that we got aware of you as consortium, and we started all the grant preparation agreement and the project implementation. So Good morning to the audience as well. Today is also blue sky in Brussels, maybe not so warm as in Cyprus, but I will now deliver a short presentation to all of you to basically give you a flavor of CINEA, our portfolio in aviation and drone activities. And with that, I believe there will be some of the speakers presenting the real content of today's webinar. So with this, I will start sharing my screen. Let me just show the slide. I hope you are able to see the slide. Can you confirm,
We can see them perfectly.
That's perfect. That's great. So indeed, I mean, I have less than 10 minutes. I will try to be quick, but I will also make the point on the important aspects that I believe the audience will be interested in. So indeed, I will just give her a short overview of the drone portfolio in aviation that we have at CINEA. So CINEA, for those of you who are not aware, it's the European Climate Infrastructure and Environment Executive Agency, part of the European Commission, and with the delegation and the mandate to implement Horizon Europe Cluster 5, among many of EU programs. I will introduce this in a couple of minutes. I'm part of the unit C3, which is Horizon Europe Transport, and I'm a project officer in the aviation team. So I will cover just a general overview of CINEA for all of you to get aware of our activities. I will just give a couple of slides on aviation and drones portfolio that we are currently managing and already increasing in the years to come. And I will just conclude with a slide with the three takeaway messages that you should keep in mind whenever you hear CINEA and drones. So indeed, CINEA is one of the executive agencies, parts of the European Commission. You may be aware of the main players being the Commission, the Parliament, and the Council of the European Union. So we are part of the European Commission, and we are one of the executive agencies currently implementing the Climate Infrastructure and Environment portfolio. We basically built on our predecessor, which was INEA, which was the Innovation and Network Executive Agency. And under the new multi-financial framework, we basically manage a large portfolio of, as I said before, Horizon Europe Cluster 5. So this is climate, energy, and mobility. Together with Connecting Europe Facility 2, so the continuation of Connecting Europe Facility 1, and the new innovation fund, which it's meant to fund and implement big projects having an impact on the reduction of CO2 emissions. Also the LIFE program, and we include of course from our predecessor agency the programs Horizon 2020 and Connecting Europe Facility. AW Drones is one Horizon 2020 project, and in overall we can say that the main goal of CINEA in the years to come is to implement all the EU programs that contribute to the European Green Deal. Having said that, we basically do the whole grant management life cycle, and we start by evaluating and selecting the projects that we're answering the call for proposals. And once we have the evaluation done, we invite those proposals that will be getting the funds for the grant preparation agreement. And once we have the project started, we proceed with the technical and financial monitoring. We are also, and we will be more and more involved in the feedback to policy to the relevant director generals of the European Commission. And with this, we conclude the whole life cycle of grant management. So in terms of aviation, we've been having a portfolio increasing in terms of aviation projects dealing with research and innovation aspects in all areas. Already in late 2014, so at the beginning of Horizon 2020, and we've been also publishing, and I think it's relevant for the audience, a set of compilations of the different projects and their contributions to different aspects of the policy needs. There you have the three brochures basically covering aspects of the green aviation already in 2015-2016, also another from 2017 dealing with the collaborative aviation research, and last year another basically describing the contributions of the projects towards the climate neutral aviation. And you see on the right hand side of your screen that there is January 2022 one of drones, and it's indeed is already confirmed. Next month we will be launching a publication collecting and describing the contributions of our portfolio in drones, and this is just to let you know that the drones portfolio is becoming more significant in our activities. And to be precise, we currently have 5 ongoing H2020 projects for more than a year. And here, of course, I could not start otherwise that is with AW drones, which is the project you are attending today to this final dissemination event of basically a coordination and support action that answer the topic of airworthiness of mass market drones. At the end of these 3 years, it's clear that the contribution has been way beyond the original description of the topic, and we are very pleased with that. And we also have another 4 projects funded later on dealing with innovative solutions to ensure safety in transport. Some of them dealing with inspection of infrastructure, the others dealing with security of ports and airports, other dealing with maintenance of railway infrastructure, and others also dealing with the integration of these innovative solutions into the EU space. So these are the 5 projects that have been running already for quite some time, in particular for AW drones almost for 3 years. And then we have another 4 that launched this year, covering the use of drones in urban mobility, which is also becoming one of the hot topics. In particular, we have 3 from topic MG 3.6. You can check also online there in the link, which was towards sustainable urban mobility, another research and innovation action. And we have another CSA basically preparing and giving recommendations to effectively deploy urban air mobility in urban and peri-urban areas. But I have to say that also we had already one finished H2020 project dealing with drone swarms, basically using 4G and 5G infrastructure, and was somehow the first exploratory steps in the use of swarms, of drone swarms for instance, drone infrastructure inspection and the integration into the unmanned airspace. So with this, we have, as you see, 10 projects currently under our portfolio. We're very happy with that. We foresee that in the next years we will be increasing that portfolio also with Horizon Europe projects. And if I may say, because I'm just getting short of time, the 3 takeaways that you should bring home is basically that we are in charge of the implementation of all the EU programs contributing to the European Green Deal. So whenever you hear the European Green Deal, you can be quite sure that we will have something related in our daily activities, and also including drones where relevant, mainly covering the infrastructure side, and with that, it's part of the extensive aviation portfolio that we have obtained under the previous framework program Horizon 2020. And what I can just say is that we will continue to do this implementation of projects answering topics related to aviations and to drones in the years to come under the new framework program Horizon Europe. So with this, I hope that you got a bit of that overview of our activities, and in particular our portfolio in drones, very much related to the discussions that we will be having today. So thanks a lot. Back to you, Damiano. For me, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm very happy to see so many people interested in the activities of the project. And yeah, best wishes. 9:30. All over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Vladimir, and thank you for this introduction to the programs of the European Commission that I think is of big interest for most of the participants to this webinar. So thank you very much. Now it's time to dig more into the project itself. So it's time for you to know more about AW drones for the ones that don't know the project, and for the other, it may be a refreshment of the ideas. So I will leave the floor to Marco Ducci, who is coordinating the project together with me, and he will give you an overview of the project so that you can understand how it worked and how it is going to end its activities, and you will see the links with all the following presentations. So good morning, Marco. Please go on with your presentation.
Good morning, Damiano. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. So let me quickly share my screen. And I will start. Okay, so you should be seeing my presentation now. So as Damiano mentioned, I will give you an overview of the project. I will not go into the details of the approach and the results. There will be dedicated presentations for these, so don't worry if things will not be fully clear at the end of my presentation. This is intended to provide you an overview of what we did and why we started this project in the first place. So I'm going to cover these topics. So a very quick explanation of what is AW drones, where it's coming from, which were our objectives and scope, what was the approach we followed, and of course there will be detailed presentation on this, and how we involved external experts, because of course we didn't do all this activity in isolation. We tried to involve all relevant experts as much as possible. And finally, what are the outcomes of this project, where you can find them and when they will be available for the drone community. So let's start with a question. Why AW drones? So why this project was funded, I would say, in the first place? Well, the reason is because the regulation was being published at the time. So we are talking about late 2018. However, in many places, the regulation was making reference to recommended industry standards as the preferred way to demonstrate compliance to the regulatory requirements. However, there was a lack of a list of such recommended standards. So the idea behind AW drones was to make a review of the available standards worldwide related to drones and try to develop a list of standards that could be recommended to support the demonstration of compliance to regulatory requirements. So in order to do this activity, we first needed to collect information, of course, about what was already available, but also about what was ongoing, because many of the standards you will find in the project report are standards that have been developed during the project life, and that in some cases are still under development. Then we had to evaluate to what extent each of these identified standards was covering the requirements. And of course, our role was also to try and identify gaps and communicate these gaps to the standard design organization in order for them to consider the development of new standards or the amendment of the existing ones. So this is why AW drones started in the first place. So 3 years ago, January 2019, a consortium made of several entities, small, medium enterprises, research centers like DLR and NLR, entities covering the whole drone value chain, from manufacturers to research centers and U-Space service provider. We've put together this consortium to try and answer the challenge that I presented in the previous slide. So the project lasted 3 years. So we are going to finish at the end of this month. And it was a coordination and support action. And by this, in the jargon of the European projects, we mean something in which we don't really develop anything new, but the scope of this kind of projects is to really collect and make information which is already available more usable and useful to the entire community. So this is what the project was really about. So the objectives of our activity were to, first of all, collect information. On what? On standards. So both those that were already published and standards which were ongoing. We focused, of course, on standards specifically developed for drones, but we also looked into standards which were maybe developed for other sectors, like the automotive sector, for example, because in some cases we thought they might be applicable to drones as well. Then we carried out a critical assessment of the identified standards to identify those that could be recommended to comply with the regulatory requirements. And we developed what we started to call a meta standard, which is kind of a standard of standards. So a comprehensive list of recommended standards. This list was validated, reviewed with relevant experts, and the end result will be a knowledge base, and which is nothing more than an online repository where all this information will be easily accessible to the entire drone community. So the approach, and I will be very quick on this because my colleagues will explain this much better in the next presentations. The approach was to first do the collection and categorization of the standards, and our starting points for this were the activities carried out in Europe by the EUROUSC and in the US by ANSI. So we took their inputs, we integrated it with additional standards, we categorized the standards according to the domain they were targeting, the topic they were addressing, and then we moved to the assessment. So trying to determine which was their maturity, the cost to comply with them, these kind of things. Just to give you an idea, we have collected more than 600 standards. So our list includes a huge number of standards. Out of these 600, around half of them were fully assessed, which means they were found potentially suitable to be used as a means of compliance to some regulatory requirement. We have taken standards from all the major standard design organizations, both at European level, so EUROCAI of course, and at international level like ISO, ASTM or SAE. So we really looked into all possible sources of information. Now, the core of the activity was to assess the standards and try to map them with the regulatory requirements. So you can think about SORA operational safety objectives, for example. So we tried to map the standards that we had categorized with the regulatory inputs and try to answer the question, are these standards adequate to be used as a means of compliance for a given regulatory requirement? Well, the answer might have been no. And in that case, we identified gaps And this was the case for requirements which were not covered by any existing standard, or for requirements which were covered by a standard, but maybe this standard was just in a drafting phase, so low level of maturity, or it was not really effective in covering the entire requirement. And of course, if the answer to the question was yes, the standard was proposed, has been proposed as the preferred, let's say, acceptable mean to comply with a given requirement. So we cover different topics throughout the duration of the project. In the first year, we focused on SORA. In the second year, we also addressed the U-space requirements. And in the third and last year, so this year, we focused on the special condition light UAS. But we took an iterative approach, meaning that each year we also iterated on the results of the previous years. So at the end of the project, in December, we are going to publish a report which will include an update of the assessment of standards against SORA, an update of the standards against U-space requirements, and the initial results for the standards supporting the special condition. So it will be a comprehensive work, I hope, hundreds of pages, so quite difficult to dig into, but hopefully the open repository will help people in understanding the core results of the project. So this was the timeline on top of the three main topics which were addressed each year. We had a number of workshops and interactions with relevant stakeholders. We met regularly with the EASA experts and our advisory board to make sure that everything we were doing was shared with all relevant stakeholders, and then at the end result is not something that nobody has ever seen before. So at the end, in a nutshell, what we are doing. So we are mapping standards with requirements. So there is no biunevocal relationship between requirements and standards. So there is never a one-to-one relationship. So there might be cases in which there are many standards covering a single requirement, or the other way around. So one standard possibly supporting more than one requirement. So what our meta standard will do is to help people finding their way in this jungle. So starting from a standard, they will have the possibility to identify what are the requirements that standard can be used for, and starting from a requirement, of course, what are the standards that are recommended to support the demonstration of compliance. There were many stakeholders involved in our activity. Of course, our project officer was the main one, but we worked in close contact with EASA and the standard design organizations. EASA was involved in our activity since the very beginning. As I mentioned already, we've been running workshops at least once a year involving EASA experts to review in detail the results of the project. So what you will see in the final report was already reviewed with EASA experts. It doesn't mean it is, let's say, recognized by EASA, of course, but it means at least that it's not something we have just developed in isolation. Of course, we interacted with standard design organization as well. We regularly attended the meetings of the EUSCG, which is the European group where all major SDOs regularly meet to align and harmonize the standard development activities for drones. And we regularly presented to this group the outcomes of our project, and in particular the gaps we have identified, for them to consider updating or integrating their standards. We also had an advisory board in which we tried to involve additional stakeholders, manufacturers, operators, service providers, and people from the research and academia sector. And the idea was really to expand as much as possible the number of people involved in the review and the steering of the activity to produce at the end something which is really useful for the entire drone community. So the way we involved the stakeholders, as I mentioned, was mainly through regular workshops with the EASA experts mainly, the support from our advisory board, in which we had representatives of the whole drone value chain. They really supported both the methodological work of the project, so how to assess the standards. They helped in reviewing the results, providing recommendations, and this was very practical. So things like, look, this standard is not a good one in my view. You should remove it from the list, or you forgot to add this other standard. So at the end of the day, I really think that their support was key in ensuring that the results are comprehensive. And we also involved the general public through online surveys, and Peter will present them later on during the morning to gather an additional feedback from a more general audience. So what are the outcomes of this project? What you will find on our website in a few weeks from now. Each year we had produced a report about the state of the art of the standards for UAS. This is really a list of all the standards we have collected and categorized. And then each year we have also produced a report with the assessment of the standards. So you already have on our website the report for the first year, and I guess also for the second year. So they are covering SORA and USpace. And in a few weeks, we are going to publish also the report covering the special condition light UAS. But the biggest result, I would say, will be the open repository, which will be presented later on by Damiano, which will be this online portal where all this information will be much more easily accessible to everybody. Just to give you an idea, the final report for this year will be something around 600 pages. So you can imagine how easier it can be to dig into this amount of information through an online portal rather than scrolling 600 pages of document. So I think this is it. We've been publishing news about the projects on our social accounts, LinkedIn and Twitter, so you can keep following us. We will inform about the publication of the last report in the coming weeks. And this is our website where you can find all the results of the projects. So you are welcome to visit us. So I think this is it. If you have questions, you can write them in the specific section that is dedicated to that, and I will be happy to answer them during the rest of the morning. So thank you very much, and Damiano, over to you. I think we can hear you. It seems Damiano has some problems with the audio, so I will I will take the floor and hand over to Natale Di Rubbo from EASA. Thank you, Natale, for being here. Now it's time to have a look at what are the EASA plans for the future. So I leave the floor to you for your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning. So I want to express my gratitude for this excellent activity, this excellent work that you did since we had a very nice collaboration with the full group. And as you know, EASA was one of the main customer of this activity. Since now we will reuse the outcome of your evaluation, and we started with quite, let's say, a jungle of standards that were available for drones. Now, thanks to you, we have now a better idea on how to link the standards to our rulemaking activity. So I will share my screen. Hopefully that you can see my screen. So I will give you now an overview of our activity and then also how we are going to use the results of the study conducted by AW Drone. So
Natale, sorry,
you know that
we can't see your screen yet.
I can see like this.
Okay. Yes. Now we can.
Perfect. Okay. So the you know that the regulation on drones, so the regulation 945 and 947 became applicable at the end of 2020. And in particular, all new authorization conducted in the specific category for the regulation specific category needs to be done according to the new regulation. Then we have 1 year where the authorization that were given according to the national regulation that were present before the European regulation are still valid. So this will be until the end of this year. So by the end of this year, all authorization needs to be converted to the new European system. While instead for the open category, we are waiting that the standard for drones will be available. And I will give you some indication at the next slide. So the full open category will become applicable by 2023. In the meantime, you know that also we published the regulation on the use space that will become applicable on June 2023, but also on this one, I will give you some indication in the next slides. So it's important to identify standards since, as you know, our regulation is mostly in defining performance-based and operation-centric. So we don't prescribe how the operation can be organized. It's up to the operator to provide a good way, the safe way to conduct the operation. And here, standards really may help, especially when we consider that in the drone sector, we have sometimes some new organizations that have a lower experience, especially on safety and on aviation systems. So this is why we would like to identify as much as possible acceptable standards that then we will publish in our regulatory material as a settled means of compliance. So for the open category, here is where we have a little bit or less flexibility, because for the open category, you know that we are going to accept the use of the CE marking as a means to comply, to show verification with the technical requirement. And since this is then regulated by the market regulation, the only body that is allowed to develop standard for this kind of systems is CEN, that delegated the activity to ASD-STAN. And you may be aware that ASD-STAN was working on 4 standards that are the one listed here in the slide. And the activity now is almost complete. Actually, for the direct remote identification, the pre-European norm was published a couple of weeks ago, while for the awareness and lighting requirements, it's planned to be published, the European norm, by either the end of this year or maybe beginning of next year. And for the first norm, the one including the vast majority of the standard related to requirements for the open category, is a little bit behind and should be available as a European norm by March of next year. Now, this European norm already provide all the elements. And so even if the final document will be the harmonized European norm that will be published more or less 1 year after, because then there are some activity to be fulfilled, technically there will be no change between the pre-European norm and the final harmonized norm. So we expect that manufacturer may already start to put on the market drones compliant with the CE marking using this standard. However, there is now a discussion within the Commission and the Member State to identify if the date of applicability of the open category, that is 31st December of 2023, is still acceptable or not, because now there is now some kind of delay now we had for these norms. So there was a request to extend the applicability date, and so the discussion is going on. And by February of next year, there will be an EASA committee. So it is the normal meeting between the member state and the Commission, and they will discuss a possible extension, maybe of 1 year. Then we'll see what will be the outcome. So we will know better by end of February of next year. Now, the specific category instead is where this project were more focused, because here is where we have this approach where the regulation is more flexible, allow the operator to really organize the operation in a way that fitting better their need. And so what we will do is we will assess now the inputs that we receive from a double drone. So we know that now a number of standards were either fully, if I need to say mostly partially, considered acceptable, so as a compliant with some of the requirements on the open category, so those especially to SORA. And what we need now is to assess with using our expert if the technical content of the standard then is really satisfactory, it's really meeting what we think is the safety objective. And this is something that we are doing next year. And you may know, be aware that we published on our website a tender to have a contract with a group that may help EASA in do this assessment. So the starting point will be the outcome of the double drone, and then we expect that by the second evaluation, then we will really be able to either consider the standard acceptable, then we publish as a settlement of compliance, or if there is a gap, to identify what is the gap. And then within the European Standardization Coordination Group, EUSCG, for which I am the chairman, we are going to discuss with the standardization body how to fill this gap. And so will be those standards that are just partially fulfilling, for which there will be some additional activity to be conducted. So we expect that the standardization body may then fill the gap, and then there will be those requirements that no standard were identified. So for this one, we will discuss in the USCG who should be the standardization body that is better fit to fill that gap, avoiding that will be duplication. Now, this is not the end of the story, because you know that we are now working on what should be the future activity, especially those in the certified category. So here in this slide that maybe I already presented in some other occasion, maybe you already saw, we identified what are the expected industry developments. So we did a survey among our stakeholders, and then we saw that at this moment we already are having some operation in the specific category. So these are those listed in the upper corner left of the slide. But in this moment, we are more having operation that are in defining corridors and in area that are with lower level of risk. So what in SORA is classified up to SAIL 2, we have some SAIL 3 operation. We expect that soon the operation in the specific category will expand. So we will have also operation in free routes, also operation in the city. So having a level that is classified in SORA up to SAIL 6. And then later we will start to have instead operation with passengers on board. So what will be the aerotaxi with electrical VTOL. Now the first phase, we believe that the operation will be with a pilot on board, so will not be drones. And we know that there are already some projects with some companies that would like to start by, in 2-3 years from now to organize this kind of service, so with pilot on board. Then by the end of the decades, we expect that the pilot will be removed and we will have now really aerotaxi without pilot on board. So that will be drones flying at beginning, so with a pilot that is remotely located. And while instead autonomous operation for which the pilot will be so no intervention of human, this is something that we believe that will take a little bit more time, also because still we have some challenges in how to certify autonomous system. While instead for international cargo flights, so flights that, for example, will be like something of the size of an A320 starting from Paris to New York. This is something that we think it will happen around 2035. Also here, operation with large aircraft doing international flights with passengers on board, we think that something that will come later. So this is something we'll address in the future. So this is what we are going to address in the next phase of our regulation. And so we are developing two new proposals. We call Notice of Proposed Amendment, NPA. So the first will be published by mid of next year, where we are going to address the all operation that will be in the specific category high risk, SAIL 5 and SAIL 6, because at this moment, for example, we require that for this operation, the certificate, the aircraft needs to have a type certificate according to Part 21. So this is the same approach that we have for manned aviation, but there are some adaptation that we need to include in the Part 21 to accommodate the peculiarity of drones. And also we need to develop a new regulation for the continuing airworthiness, because the continuing airworthiness that is applicable to manned aviation does not fit drones. So this will be the main content of this MPA. Plus, we are going to address all operation of urban air mobility with pilot on board. So here we are going to introduce what are the requirements for the operator and requirements for the pilot. So the proposal will be published by mid of next year and will be then subject to a 3-month consultation. So all of you can provide your comments, and we plan to then propose to the Commission an opinion with the final draft of the changes to all the regulation affected by before the half of the 2023, and then the Commission will start the discussion with the member state, and they use the normal process to negotiate the final regulation that possibly may be then adopted no less than 1 year later, so we can say 2024. While instead in 2023 we will publish a second proposal that is addressing the urban mobility without pilot on board and this international flight operation with cargo aircraft. And also here then the opinion will be proposed 1 year after. And also in this case that we will have an extensive consultation from there where you can provide your comment. Just now also one few points on the use space. So the use space is an essential element that will allow to have operation of manned aircraft, especially in the cities or in other area where there will be a large traffic of drones or also traffic of other manned operation. So this will be essential to allow the separation and the safe integration of drones. So we know that we published a regulation in January, regulation 664, and this will be areas where some service are offered. So some service will be mandatory, and this will be the network identification, the geo-awareness, traffic information, and flight authorization. Plus, there will be some optional service. It will be the monitoring service and the weather service. So we don't expect that the use space will be deployed so everywhere. So for sure, at the beginning, they will be deployed in this area where there will be more traffic, and then little by little, it will expand. Now, it will require that then all user, manned or unmanned, that will then fly in this use space, they will need to comply with some standards. And they need to be able to receive this service. So in order to, at the end, to have really a safe flight, this will allow the beyond visual line of sight operation. So integrated with manned. So also here now we need to develop standards, and we are publishing in the next weeks an MPA, so another proposal for acceptable means of compliance and guidance material on the use space. And this will include already the identification of some standards that were based on the discussion that we had with AW Drone. My last slide is on what else. What else is we still have a lot of things to do, because our aim, as we were directed by the European Commission, is to really enable the urban air mobility. So we need to make sure that in the European city we can start to have an activity, so on package delivery and also on transportation of people to aero taxis. So there are several challenges, several areas where we need to investigate. And here you can see in the slide all the working groups that we established. And we are trying to receive the feedback from all the stakeholders and identify also how we can help the technology to evolve in order to have all the services that will be needed in order to have this urban air mobility. And you know that at this moment, I'm happy to say that we are quite advanced here in Europe to identify all needed, and also then our proposal or regulation will provide some clear indication that will help to organize this operation quite quickly in Europe. So we believe that by the mid of this decade, we may start really to have this kind of operation in the European cities. So this concludes my presentation, and now I'm happy to provide any answer if it's needed.
Thank you very much, Natale. I hope that now my microphone is working.
Yes, it's working.
Looks like this. Okay. Thank you very much, Natale. Thank you for this presentation, but also I would like to thank EASA and you in particular with all the consortium for the huge support that you gave during the project. You also hosted us a couple of times in the ancient times where we were allowed to travel in EASA beautiful headquarters in Cologne, and we have received a lot of support from you. So thank you very much for all this work done in these years, and also thank you for being here today. Okay, as said already by Mr. Rubbo, if you want to make questions, you can use the specific tool, and the other expert will be very glad to answer. Okay, now we go on with this tour of the very important international organizations, and now it's the turn of the very well-known ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, and we are very pleased to introduce Mr. Sven Halle, that is today here with us, and he will give us some insights about the drones, the UAS activities, and that are currently ongoing in ICAO. So welcome and good morning, Sven. Thank you for being here.
Yes, good morning, everybody. I hope you can see my screen. So good morning to all of you. 7th of December, it's always a special day, so I wish you a very happy International Civil Aviation Day. And I would just like to start and present and give you some of the information what we're actually doing in terms of the drone activities or UAS activities. So the short presentation is about the UTM framework update that we are doing. It's also about the U8, the humanitarian aid guidance material that has been developed, and it's also about the model regulations that have been put in place. So the work undertaken by ICAO to develop its guidance material is important to assist many of the ICAO member states that have not yet implemented UAS or UTM regulations, or that want to follow a harmonized approach. The UAS industry continues to push against operational barriers related to airspace that were designated and designed to serve conventional aviation. Many years of experience in the traditional aviation has provided critical safety data and expanded principles of safety management. And this data, along with the risk-based decision-making tools such as the Model UAS regulation or the ICAO humanitarian guidance material, provide opportunities to enable unmanned aviation. The guidance material is available for member states to use in their current form or to supplement their existing UAS regulatory framework. They have been designed to provide flexibility in terms of content, as well as by the selection of values the state may choose that reflect their level of risk tolerance. The flexibility ensures the required consistency needed for regulators and industry as the maturity evolves of the system. So taking the next slide, we continue to develop guidance material on a common framework for UTM with input from states, from industry, academia, and other stakeholders that will establish parameters for the future traffic management for unmanned aircraft. Such systems are needed to support the safe expansion and management of UAS as their numbers really start increasing. Requirements for air navigation service providers or those that will provide various services to UAS operators and remote pilots is also being developed and will be included in the overall framework for UTM. So when I look now into the UTM guidance that has been published as the common framework, so we see it's not a technical solutions document, it's safety focused. It has the aim to maintain safety and facilitate the integration with existing aviation systems, and it supports the technological developments while enabling stakeholders to grow safely and efficiently. A bit of detail what's actually in that framework. So the first edition that was released always after the drone enable. Drone enable is one of our key activities where we ask for specific input, and we had 3 of those drone enables, and you can actually see what has been so far done in this framework development. So for the first edition, the topics were registration, identification, and tracking, communication system, geofencing-like systems, and potential architectures. Out of the second drone enable, we then had UTM, ATM boundaries and transitions, information exchange between ATM and UTM. And then the third released edition was about risk assessment and contingency procedures, service provider structure, and separation and deconfliction in UTM. Currently, the 4th edition is still under review. So we're looking into questions like what performance requirements are required of the UA, for instance, altitude reporting in AGL, MSL, barometric, or GPS, or perhaps there's a solution where measurements is irrelevant and only the output is important. What kind of certification requirements will be needed for a UTM system or service provider within the UAS systems? And when we looked at various topics dealing with UTM in and around an aerodrome, not from an airspace access perspective, but from an aerodrome operative or operations perspective, we also have to look into those activities. The aim is to publish the 4th edition guidance material within the 2nd quarter of 2022. So normally 1 year after the last drone enable. I would like now to focus on the U8 guidance, and that is the UAS guidance material for humanitarian and emergency response. This was specifically developed to support humanitarian related operations, which usually need to be deployed to an area and provide services in very tight timelines. Cannot approach it like the conventional approach where the time that would be needed to have a discussion with the engaged CAAs and to get operations ongoing would take way too long. So here we have a full emphasis on a safety risk assessment approach. We want to facilitate with this guidance material rapid, quick approvals for operations, and also provide consideration for carriage of dangerous goods and address societal constraints. We have taken examples and forms from local CAAs that have already introduced expedited approvals and established those approval processes. And we also have benchmarked with our counterparts in the UN system and NGOs, which are already operating drones and APAs for humanitarian aid. Now, I would like to introduce you, the last point is the model UAS regulations that have been published. Those model regulations were developed by the UAS AG, and it would be beneficial, I think, from our perspective, that we would show you also an update and overview of those valuable tools. They have been released, and several countries have used the model regulations to develop their individual state-specific UAS regulations. And we were actually tasked by the 39th session of the Assembly in 2016, which noted ICAO's work to build a regulatory framework for international flight operation of APAs and expressed broad support for ICAO to exercise a leadership role in the development of standards and guidance material for the harmonization and regulation of UAS that remains outside of the APAS framework. It was recommended that ICAO should address issues also as cybersecurity and educational campaigns when developing those material. During the 13th Air Navigation Conference in 2018, there was again broad support expressed for the formulation and implementation of technical and regulatory solutions for UAS operations that remain outside of the APAS framework, and states were encouraged to share information regarding very low altitude operations, UTM, the tactical risk assessment models, and ensure that approved UTM systems are interoperable with existing ATM systems. Additional recommendations for states were to work with ICAO and develop solutions for authorization of non-certified UAS operations over the high seas. And more recently, at the 40th Assembly in 2019, the Assembly, which included the topics of UAS, UTM, in addition to ARPAs, recommended that ICAO should accelerate and expand work on the development of a full regulatory framework for UAS and UTM. And it was also recommended that provisions and guidance material will be developed to address safety risk for the unauthorized presence of UA in close proximity of manned aircraft, but also in close proximity to aerodromes, which has become a growing topic. So the model regulation, as you can see here, is part 101. It covers the open category and addresses topics such as registration, standardization, standard operating conditions, approved operating areas, segregated airspace, controlled airspace, and so on. Part 102 applies if the UA is operated other than in accordance with Part 101 or in a specific category. In this category, the remote pilot must be licensed and a valid UA authorization or UAS operator certificate is needed. The operator must comply with the operator's practices and procedures and requires a safety management system. These approvals may be provided by the CINEA or the approved aviation organization. And then with Part 149 for the approved aviation organization, this document addresses applicability rules governing the certification and operation of the AAO's certification requirements and operating requirements. So in summary, the model regulation that we have here, so we see the Part 101, the Part 102, we have for the certified category, the ICAO annexes, the advisory circulars that have been published as means of compliance, including advisory circular for the transportation of dangerous goods, which was prepared in conjunction with the Cargo Safety Working Group of UAS. There has been information and guidance describing acceptable means, but not the only means of demonstrating compliance with the regulation and standards. So a lot has been done here, and in addition, we also have introduced guidance material, like mentioned, like the U8 as a detailed narrative for humanitarian operations, including forms for expedited applications for operations and the UTM framework. So how should actually the model regulations be used? Because of the model regulations, we have a consistency with the current and development SARPs under the convention. We can also scale this to address risk and safety mitigations presented by the civil domestic UAS operations. They can be used as they are, or they can be adapted as the states seem appropriate. And the model regulation cover the essential elements of safe operation of UAS and certification elements. The material was derived from existing regulations from several states. You can see them listed here. And the model UAS regulations are a mix of prescriptive and performance-based regulations. The prescriptive regulations are used in circumstances to achieve a specific outcome, and the performance-based regulations are used and focused on the desired and measurable outcomes, such as identifying the level of accuracy of a piece of equipment rather than specifying the equipment that must be used. Also, the capabilities of UAS technologies increase. The safety data of UA operations will inform the need for additional regulations. Advancements in navigation and communication technologies will provide additional considerations. Because of this intended to be a living document, it is anticipated that it will be updated as the industry developments mature. The model regulations do not address topics such as privacy, insurance, economic authority. These, along with the other items listed here on the slide, environmental requirements, law enforcement requirements, and also some of the cybersecurity issues will need to be addressed by any state that would decide to implement the model UAS regulations into their UAS regulatory framework. States that have already or may have already addressed those topics in their existing aviation regulations will share their practices in the ICAO fora, and in some cases it may be important to add an amendment to those regulations, giving the data that has been presented by those states. The material is available on our Safety Unmanned Aviation website. You can find the model regulations, you can find the guidance material, you will find the UAS toolkit, you have the UTM guidance edition 3 material. It's all publicly available. It's not like a standard where you have limited access only. And I would like to invite you to have a look at the website if something of what was in the presentation seemed interesting for you. So again, thanks for your attention. Thanks for having ICAO being part of this webinar. And again, happy International Civil Aviation Day. Thank you.
And thank you very much. Thank you very much. And this is, I think, very interesting also for the participants. And yes, I think that this has been a very comprehensive presentation, and a lot of doubts in the audience may have been answered. Nonetheless, if you still have some questions or things to clarify, please use the tool. Very good. Now it's time for the airlines to have their voice heard. So I'm very pleased to leave the floor to Stefano Prola. And thank you for being here. He will introduce us a bit of information about IATA and how is IATA dealing with these new challenges brought by drones. Good morning, Stefano, and welcome.
Good morning, Damiano. Good morning, everyone. Let me see if I can share my presentation.
Yes, 1 second. Yes, 1 second.
Yeah.
You're right.
Sure. In the meantime, well, I can introduce myself. I have a background as pilot, and I've been in the military and in the airline as pilot, as also managing manager, and in the safety and the organization. I joined IATA 7 years ago, and I'm working in the European Safety and the Flight Operation Department, and I'm connecting now from Madrid, where we have our headquarters. Okay, so let me see. Okay, the screen. All right. Do you see?
Very good.
Do you see now my presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Very well. So IATA for the UAS community may be seen maybe as a counterpart, but as we see, we were, and I'll conclude that we are one in the sky. So we share the sky, and also we share a lot of interest in the business that is coming, and in all the potentials that this type of operations are opening. We are an association, the Association of Airlines. Our members are global members, covering basically 83% of the traffic, both passenger and cargo. So that's very, very relevant as well to the US market. As far as this project, I was happy to be involved in this and to hear what was going on. About standards, as ICAO published standards like the SARP, which are really then the regulation that the authorities, the local authorities, or EASA in this case for you, has to implement, as well IATA is producing standards for airlines in the safety safety domain, and as well we are members of EuroCAE. One thing about standards is that I was really surprised when we got to work in this sort of area on how many standard organizations are there in the world. You expect that the standard is one, but there's so many standards. So I really commend your work on this job, because collecting all this is really important. But then let's come to our presentation. We want to share what basically in a way is important to us. In many ways we are interested as airlines, and first we were let's say the airlines were a bit concerned of sharing the same airspace. Okay, we are airspace users, but we are only one of the many airspace users that are coming up in this space. And so that was the safety concern. But of course, now we're seeing our members expanding their business model, including the operation of drones of UAS for many reasons. One, for example, the maintenance around the big airplanes, but then expanding to cargo and whatnot. Now, I like to point out that so we are not only, yes, we talked about U-Space, obviously, which is the air mobility, but you see in the slides there, outside the traditional, let's say, players that we fly in IFR airspace mostly, there's obviously the lower, let's say, band, but also the higher, and so many new potential is opening up with new technologies. So we're interested in all these kind of new players. What is important to us as airlines, let's say, for now. So airlines, as I already mentioned, are exploring the use of new concepts for the transport of goods goods and people. So cargo, but then future passenger with new technology, new automation. And so here we are very interested. As I said, airspace is something that we sort of in the past, let's say in a bad word, but we thought we were the main players, civil airplanes together with the military, of course, and now we have to face on the lower side and on the higher side, so in the space and on the higher levels, many more players. But every challenge that we say, it's an opportunity. So UTM, so the development of UTM and STM, so the space traffic management, we see that could provide an opportunity to modernize the classical ATM as well. So system and concepts. So this is also why we are particularly interested, because up to now we dealt with a traditional way to manage the traffic, the air traffic, but coming the U-Space, the UTM, and the space traffic management, we have to blend them all in. They cannot be living apart, and so here we are. We want to be involved, and we want to be connected. COVID-19 maybe fast track some of these concepts. We are working more remotely, unfortunately, in a way. So we still have the value of face-to-face and then meeting people. It's obviously not replaceable completely, but this really made an additional push to have this type of operations integrated. What do we see? So there's a big discussion on many levels. So the implementation of artificial intelligence, more automation. There's a lot of discussions also, and obviously this is going to be applicable for the UAS and the space. There is even philosophical and ethical discussion about this. How we merge this automation, and there was mentioned by some other presenter, eventually the autonomous operations even, with what we are more familiar with the responsibility of men being at the command of airplanes, for example, helicopters, and so forth. So this is a huge challenge, but it's a very interesting challenge, and apparently technology is running sometimes faster than what we are capable sometimes to do as human. I already mentioned this a little bit. So we are seeing coming up an increased number of traffic in the lower airspace, but also in the upper airspace, and the coordination with this is going to be a key factor. So this is why we are interested. What is needed to reach an instead of a highly automated ATM system, keeping the extremely high safety record that we have up to now? Well, few points here, obviously. The regulatory framework, we are pushing also for the men and let's say more traditional. We've been advocating this for the longest time. Performance-based regulations, so not very prescriptive regulations going into the details, but the regulation should be broad, giving maybe just the aim to what you have to perform, and then through acceptable means of compliance, through standards, the ones that this project was exploring, then we go into the details of how the operations are handled. This is the only way to keep up with the developments, because otherwise, if you go into the details of maybe even the technology related, then you need an extra cycle to update all these details, while the performance-based regulatory framework will need less updating over time. Maybe it's faster to update a standard than a regulation where, for example, in Europe, we have to go through EASA in a way, rulemaking task, then the notice of proposed amendment, like Natale was mentioning, obviously, the opinion, and the commission. So this is something that we are really advocating for. Cyber resilience and trust. Obviously, this is one of the key factor, not only for the UAS, for the traffic as well, but obviously because of the UAS are relying heavily on transmissions and all electronic means. This is one of the key elements. Partnership and collaboration. Christos at the beginning, that's where we started from. We are willing to be partners with the UAS operators, manufacturers, together with the traffic management organizations. This is the only way to get together and come up with something that will be useful for everybody. Harmonization and interoperability. So this is what is all about the standards, and we promote, obviously, with our headquarters are facing ICAO in Montreal. So, and we have, for example, colleagues from Montreal that are participating in the ARPAS panel, the ICAO ARPAS panel. We are advocating a global standards, because that's the way this will be beneficial for the manufacturer, for the operators to be able to move across boundaries. What are the obstacles? Some ideas on the obstacles we see, and as we are also participating to the development of the Joint Strategy 2.0 with participating with the European Commission. What may be some obstacles? System integration regulatory framework. This is some of the obstacle. This business, let's say, came up bottom down from many projects, many incredible technology, but then integration and feed them in the regulatory framework, it's a real challenge. Investment, we're happy to see that the EU, the Union, is really providing good investments, but it's some of the money is a driving factor in what is going to be this workforce and new players. So we understand that yes, for example, there are now the requirements for licensing for some of these operations, but as we see that some is going to be done by big operators like the big cargo and delivery organizations that are out there, but as well as very small operators, people that just buying drones at the shop on the web and out there to do something that potentially is dangerous. So the qualification of this workforce and the education of these new forces is one of the main key points. Some of the suggestions to have actions to improve this will be to review the ATM assumptions, so the air traffic management. I'm going back to the beginning. So we take this as an opportunity to revise and improve, automate more the way we as a domain now manage air traffic. New mechanism for global standards, as we said, more performance-based. Really, this new actors are challenging our traditional way to do business, starting from safety regulations. Prioritize tech roadmap, so we have to keep up with the technology, which is like in improving at a speed that we are really not used to. The regulators' competence as well. We're not regulators, but also like for our organizations, the competence in this domain is something that obviously needs to be tackled. Efficiency at the system level. Well, yes, the integration is key of this. So we cannot work separately, and let's say this is, for example, can be said about the green, the energy saving, the energy efficiency, the environment. So we cannot look at each separate domain, separate pieces of the big puzzle for improving the system. So efficiency, and we're looking at energy, green, let's say, efficiency has to be seen globally. So the integration, for example, for the air traffic has to be efficient at system level. We cannot do it separately. And finally, competence of workforce. So as I mentioned before, through, for example, investment in this, really we need a way to improve the competence of the folks. Now I conclude with this. This is one of the IATA and my friend colleague that was really a driver on this initiative. We are all one in the sky. So we used to be, as I said, a bit privileged in the airspace, but now we're not. But we have to become a big family. We are all together in this, and so we're not opposing each other. We have to make sure that all our interests will come together and develop this as best as we can. So thank you for having me here, and really all the best for the prosecution and the conclusion of this really good project. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Stefano, and thank you for the final message from the airlines. It's very good to see that you are very open to these new little brothers, and so this is also why we want to have also your voice heard at this event. And okay, so thank you very much for once again for participating and for your message. Thank you very much. Okay, I see that in the meantime we have some questions. Most of them have been already answered, but I ask the experts to have a look sometimes at the questions tab, because we are assigning some of the questions to the experts. Okay, now before we have a well-deserved coffee break, we have the last presentation for this first session about international organizations, and we are very glad and happy to have on board also Eurocontrol. So now we have the voice of the ATM actors, and we have today Giancarlo and Munish that represent the Eurocontrol. And if I have understood well, you are experiencing maybe problems with the presentation, and you would like me to show it?
Just to mitigate the risk, thank you, Damiano. If you can share directly the presentation as we discussed on the chat, it will be really welcome, because sometimes I'm having difficulties. So just to mitigate any risk, probably it's better if you take it from your side. You have received it yesterday evening, I guess.
Okay, no problem.
So just waiting for that. Anyway, while Damiano is taking care of showing the slides, the few slides we have prepared, I would like to say that will be a sort of joint presentation between myself and Munish. Probably you already know very well, Munish is well known, let's say, is our ambassador with our stakeholders working on the U-Space and drones. So I will take care of presenting you the initial slides, while then I will move to, I will hand over to Munish for the rest of the presentation, and he will explain you what are the initiatives we are playing. So mainly, let's say what we have, what we are going to present to you today is what is the current, what are the current activities that Eurocontrol is managing in the U-Space and UAS domain, and what is the role that we are playing on that. So yes, thank you, Damiano. Now we can see the slide. Probably you can move to the first slide. just after the to better explain what is let's say what are the activities that we are managing, I would like to recall the fact that as you know, Eurocontrol is a co-founder of CESAR joint undertaking, so it means that we are closely working with CESAR joint undertaking on several U-space activities. And we are also providing, let's say, a non-marginal in-kind contribution to the CESAR joint undertaking research and innovation activity. And not only to CESAR joint undertaking, we are also covering some Horizon 2020. We are contributing to some Horizon 2020 U-space related research and innovation projects. Some of them were also mentioned by the by the project officer at the beginning of the seminar. Some key research projects that we are currently managing are referring to the Chorus XOM project. That is mainly a project that is dealing with the concept of operations. It's a very large scale demonstration, first of all. So it's looking at an higher TRL, and is mainly divided in two activities. The first cluster of activities to consolidate the concept of operations for the European U-space services, looking at the extension for the urban air mobility. And then we have a very large series of, let's say, a flight trials campaign that will more or less support what we are defining in terms of concept of operations. It's a large consortium. Eurocontrol is the coordinator of this project. And of course, there are several activities that we are already conducting there. Currently, we have already prepared the 7 demonstrations we will have in 2022. And in any case, you can have further information looking at the website of Chorus XOM in case you are interested. And of course, myself, I will be available as project coordinator to provide you all the information you may need on that. Then we have also a contribution provided to the Bubbles project. Again, this is an exploratory research project that has been co-funded by CESAR joint undertaking that is mainly looking at the U-space separation management service. And another important contribution that we have is on DACUS project led by the Spanish colleagues. Let's say several Spanish partners are working in DACUS, and we are working mainly on demand and capacity optimization in the U-space. That is an important element as well, and is closely linked with the separation management services. Icarus, another important project that is led by an Italian cluster mainly. It's looking at the definition of an integrated common altitude reference system for U-space that could be an important enabler for having a proper integration of US operations with respect to the manned aviation, such as the general aviation and so on, especially when we are at very low level. Other important projects are INVIRCAT, that is dealing with the wide IFR, let's say the larger IFR air pass control in airports and TMA, so how we can integrate and accommodate these type of operations within the managed airspace and in close, let's say, integration with the air traffic management. Then we have You Are Cleared, again led by the Italian, that is looking at remain well clear concept, again closely linked with the tactical U-space separation management service and with some airborne capabilities, and this is mainly focusing on the class Delta and Gulf type of airspace. And finally, we have a project that is a research, an industrial research project that is called Aura. This is especially focused on the, let's say, interface, on the definition of the interface between the air traffic management and so the manned aviation with the U-space operations that are mainly referring to the unmanned operations. So this is the cluster of main activities we have, and Eurocontrol is strongly contributing to these activities. Of course, you will find all the relevant information. There are websites available for each of the projects I mentioned. And so, but in any case, if you would like to have more information, you can contact myself directly. On the Horizon 2020 side, I would like to mention some of the projects that, as I said, at the beginning, the project officer was also mentioning. So we are contributing to 5D Aerosafe, that is a project led by Airbus, that is working on 5 applications that are mainly supporting airports operations as well as waterways and transport in general. And then we have two projects that are led by mainly R&D establishment, the European R&D establishment, that are Labyrinth and Drone for Safety. Again, for all these projects, I don't want to bother you so much. You will find a lot of information on the relevant website. You can easily retrieve on the internet. And next slide, please, Damiano. Thank you so much. Damiano, can you move ahead to the next? Yeah, thank you so much. So a few words about what we are doing really on the U-Space concept of operations in close cooperation with CESAR joint undertaking. Eurocontrol is mainly leading and transversally coordinating 17 CESAR and Horizon 2020 projects that are related to the U-Space and UAM, and we are, let's say, working together, mainly using as a pivot Core 6M project on several threads. Some of them are closely linked also with Abu Drones, and Abu Drones is also part of the discussions we were having in the past meetings. And let's say the main objective is mainly to focus our discussion on the development of a common concept of operations that could be an important enabler to accelerate the research and development on new space, as well as the deployment, as we are expecting. And we are also within this framework, let's say, fertilizing and let's say doing a bit of a cross information exchange among the various stakeholders and the various actors. And the main objective in doing that is to try to ensure a consistency, a transversal consistency on the project outcomes that will come. I have also to say that one of the main objectives we have is to help CESAR joint undertaking developing a concept of operations that could be a reference concept of operations for the European, let's say, deployment activities. And this is also of interest of EASA, and this is why we're also cooperating with them, as well as, let's say, with other regulation and standardization bodies, as EuroCAE, and also some American standardization body. Probably we can move ahead, Damiano, in case I can get some question on this, but the main objective, as I said, is a sort of transversal coordination to mitigate the risk that we will have at the end of the research activity, some diverging concept of operation. So our aim is mainly to, let's say, reconcile all the outcomes and try to come out with a consolidated concept of operations for the U-Space operation in Europe. On the regulation side, as I said, we have a very close relationship established with EASA. There is also a memorandum of cooperation that we were defining with the European supervisory authority, and we are working on several threads. I don't want to come too much into the details, but one of the most recent and most important activity is to support CESAR joint undertaking, EASA, to develop the acceptable means of compliance and the guidance material that will be attached to the U-Space regulation that will come next year. Of course, we are also working on the counter UAS activity, and we are also doing a bit of dissemination across Europe. In these days, for example, Munish was busy with some training activities in our institute in Luxembourg for our stakeholders, and this is part, let's say, of all these work that we are doing on the subject. Of course, with ICAO as well, we are member of the ICAO Airpass panel, and we are also working in the special panel working group 2 on the C2 link, and there are several other activities that we're conducting with them, also within the US advisory group of ICAO. Probably we can move forward, Damiano. I think I can say just a few words about the standardization part, and then I will hand over to Munish. Yeah, thank you. Okay, in this framework, let's say, we are also supporting the standards development in Europe. And this is why, as I was mentioning before, we are working closely with some of our stakeholders like ACI and some others on the counter US subject. And we're also working with EuroCAE on the definition of some of the standards they are working on. mainly on the document, technical document 286, as well as on the interoperability requirements for the counter-UAS systems. We are also participating in the advisory board of some projects that are addressing R&D projects that are addressing this subject, and this is closely linked with support to the standards development we have. With IATA, that was already explaining the range of activities they have before, we are mainly providing domain expertise in, again, developing the document they were publishing on the unauthorized US incursions close to the airports and the relevant interactions. This is more or less what we are doing in the current framework, and then I will hand over to Munish that will provide you more details on the other activities we have. Munish, please, the floor is yours.
Giancarlo. Thank you very much, Giancarlo. I think you set the scene very well, made my life easy. As Giancarlo highlighted, we are involved in supporting our member states across the European Union and beyond. Now, there are a number of activities that we are working with where we're supporting in the implementation of U-Space across the board, but there are some that we'd just like to showcase and highlight to you to give you a flavor. No doubt we're working with the Paris Olympics Committee to try and establish a test corridor between Bretigny, where our innovation center is, and in the region to validate scenarios and equipment. And if you will have noticed that on Friday last week, we actually signed a memorandum of understanding with the Greater Paris region to create such a corridor. So we're moving forward with that. But very importantly, where a lot of our resource and effort is going into it is in conducting airspace assessment. As Natale, my colleague from EASA, pointed out earlier, that in the regulation 664, one of the things identified is to conduct an airspace assessment, particularly if you look at within the urban environment itself. And that is to understand what the current constraints and restrictions are, what the current risks are, and what kind of opportunities are available for drones and eVTOLs to fly in that use space. We have developed a method for conducting airspace assessments. We've completed one in Riga, and I think we're in the last stages of the one in Israel, as well as in the process at the moment, quite advanced with Estonia, and I believe Denmark and Italy have just started in their first phase. One of the things we have learned from these airspace assessments are some of the risks that the individual cities will have to find countermeasures for, so that we can then help them to figure out what's available, and depending on what their objective is in that airspace, whether it is to fly eVTOLs to transfer humans, or it is to transfer parcels using smaller drones with smaller payloads perhaps, they can then try and figure out as a next step on what the airspace design should look like once we know what the situation of the airspace assessment is. So you only see the 5 cities mentioned there, but we have many, many requests from other member states to conduct these assessments. And we've created a method, and this method will be available publicly through EuroControl website. As Giancarlo also pointed out a minute ago, we're also, in addition to these, providing technical and operational guidance to a number of member states. I myself personally have conducted a webinar for half a day with my colleague Andrew Haley to Turkey, as well as Moldova, and other colleagues of mine are now involved in providing this guidance to other member states. Just before joining this presentation in the morning, I was running a module on EuroControl EAN's training center, where we're running a 3-day training course on all aspects related to use space, right the way through R&D, through the political economic context, to the support to member states, and then deployment and so on. And that course is running as we speak. So that's another way that we are providing support. Next slide, please, Damiano. Thank you. And just to highlight one aspect in Brattini in the Innovation Center that we are very actively working is, as you already know, we have ATM simulation platform for many, many years, and we provide that facility to our member states. We're trying to extend and modernize that one to bring in the simulated environment to validate use-based services, and the activity, the memorandum of understanding signed last week, goes towards achieving that goal itself. And the idea there would be that in future we should be able to provide support to our UTM service providers, the CAAs and the NSPs and so on, to be able to conduct neutral validations against the standards and regulations which are also being developed iteratively as we go. So this is a bit more like a future activity that we're contributing towards. We should also be in a position to provide simulation capabilities for research projects that are taking place under the auspices of CESAR as well as Horizon 2020, and at the same time highlight the UTM concepts to key stakeholders. So we want to be in a place where we have this capability, but we also want to be in a place that this capability is networked with other similar facilities that might exist throughout European Union, so that we create a network of simulation centers, because not any one simulation center will probably be able to do everything. And the idea is to share and contribute in partnership. Next slide, please. And yes, you will have, if you haven't noticed, then just to highlight that last week on the 30th of November, the European Union, European Commission DG Move provided a mandate to an existing initiative called the European Network of Use-Based Demonstrators, where the 4 organizations, European Commission, EUROCONTROL, EASA, and CESAR joint undertaking jointly have been helping the use-based community in sharing best practices and lessons learned since October 2018. With the release of the regulations, particularly the one in April for 664, a lot of cities and non-aviation stakeholders have been going to the European Commission seeking help and support to integrate their services, their technology services, and also their need for the cities to have use-based and drones flying, or use of use-based to fly drones above their airspace. They've gone to the European Commission, and the Commission gave us a mandate on 30th of November last week to expand the scope of our services under this initiative to go to the cities, to those non-aviation stakeholders, and reach out and to accelerate now what was earlier a demonstration of use-based activities, now to move quickly towards deployment. And we will do that with our partners. And currently we have about 400 plus members in this network, and I would encourage you to become one as well to benefit from it. Next slide, please. That brings me to the end. Thank you, Damiano, and thank you all for listening. A very quick overview by Giancarlo and myself to give you where we are, but feel free to ask questions, and if you have any questions in future, please drop either Giancarlo or myself an email, and we'll be happy to come back and help you with. But if there are any questions, please go forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Please, for all the experts, remember that the questions will be asked through the system, so maybe you will see some questions assigned to you. So, okay, thank you very much once again to EuroControl, and this presentation ends up our first session that was about awareness of the activities on drones among the various international organizations we invited today. The, let's say, second part that will be after the coffee break will dig into the details of the projects, of the AW drone project, and mainly on the outcome of the project. So we will provide you with insights about how we worked, but in particular what we delivered and what you can consult directly on the internet as an outcome of this project. So Now we should have in few minutes coffee break, but before going this well-deserved coffee, I'm asking all the participants 1 second of attention, because now we will launch a poll with for you now. So during the coffee break, you will be asked to answer some questions, very simple questions. But before doing this, I want to launch a very brief test for you. I don't know whether you can see it on the screen now. You should be able to see a very simple question. Okay, I see that someone is answering. So if someone of you cannot see the poll on the screen, please write on the chat. You now should be supposed to have on your screen a very simple question. If you don't have it, please write down in the chat that you are experiencing problems. Okay, for the moment, I see that more of 50% of you have answered, and the answer is very simple because it's yes or yes. Okay, very good. I think that the test has worked, so I'm closing this very stupid question, and I will instead launch in 1 second the real poll, but not before having once again thanked all the speakers of this first session. And I would like also to recap the agenda that now you are kindly asked to come back at 11:30, because we will go on with the program and with the very interesting presentations on the project. In the meantime, please take your coffee and answer the question you will see on your screen. So once again, thank you to the speakers. If you are going to leave, I would like to goodbye you, but if you want to stay with us, you are very welcome to stay until the end. So thank you, and see you again at 11:30. In the meantime, enjoy your coffee. Thank you. Okay, welcome back to the webinar. I'm now closing the poll. I see that a lot of people has already voted, and we have quite interesting results that we will publish just after the end of the webinar in the next days. Maybe not tomorrow because it's an holiday in Italy, but by the end of this week, the results of the polls will be for sure published on our website. Okay. So as said, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your coffee. Now it's time to go more into the details of the results of the EWTRONS project. We will now have 3 presentations about the main outcomes of the project, and we start now with the data collection. So how and to what extent we collected data about the standards during the project, and the methodology that we used to both select and then assess the standard collected. So I will now leave the floor to Sebastian Cain from DLR, and then to Tom van Birgelen from NLR. Good morning and welcome, Sebastian. Let me give you presenter's rights so that you are able to show your presentation. Please confirm, Sebastian, that you are able to show your screen now.
Yeah, the dialog just popped up. Give me a second.
Perfect. Very good.
So can you already see my screen?
Yes.
It's the presentation?
Presentation mode.
Okay, perfect. So hello also from my side. My name is Sebastian Cain, as Damiano already introduced me. I'm working for the German Aerospace Center, DLR. And we were leading one of the work packages, and I will now quickly give an overview about some work that was performed throughout the project. Okay, to put the work into perspective, I will repeat this this picture that Marco already introduced, showing the overall aim of the project. So the central question here is a standard a possible acceptable means of compliance for a given regulatory requirement. And the topics that we will focus now on are more or less the blue bubbles here. So what we need is a set of categorized standards, let's say, a jungle of standards, as Natale called it, that we set up for the project. And of course, the second aspect, the regulatory requirements, that we then somehow have to link to these standards. So we did this in the working step data collection and mapping, and I will show you a bit what we set up for this steps throughout the project. So as a first step, we created a baseline document representing our database called here the data collection of drone-related standards. Which you can imagine as a huge table, and the picture showing here is more or less the header of this table. So we collected the general document data, descriptions, but also the SDOs, the numbers, things like that. And we made some structuring of all these documents, putting them in domains, and then also giving keywords to be very flexible with our categorization, let's say. And this document we filled with all the standards that are currently available that we were able to find. And luckily, we did not have to start from zero at this point, but there are already very comprehensive data collections available from the SCOs. So the three most important, I think, are named here. So the USCG Rolling Development Plan, which was our starting point for this data collection, but then also huge overviews coming from ANSI and ASTM, containing huge amounts of standards referenced. Marco showed that we had a lot of partners contributing through the project with different perspectives, so manufacturers and operators, UTM, which were also able to contribute with their very specific knowledge and so expand this database further on. Okay, at this point we have a huge document, let's say, which is not totally new, and the task was then to include the regulatory aspects that we in the end want to examine. So this was done in 3 iterations. The first iteration, that was already mentioned by Marco, focused on the SORA requirements. SORA in 2018 was just accepted by EASA, coming from the JAROS group. And what we did is we extracted these requirements from the SORA and included them in our document. So this is pretty straightforward for the OSOs, but more than that, we also need AMCs for the ground risk mitigation. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but participants are telling me that they cannot see your screen. They seem to be stuck on the poll. Can you try unsharing and then resharing it, please?
Yes.
No, participants are saying that they can now see the screen. They had to refresh the page.
Okay.
Okay.
So everybody
maybe
should see slide 5 right now, and maybe I will say when I switch to the next slide, so people can confirm whether they see it. Okay.
Thanks, Sebastian.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, where were we? At the data collection and the SORA requirements. So we included the SORA requirements here, not only the OSOs, but also the mitigations, as they require some AMCs as well. And as an extra box shown here, it's the containment step of the SORA, which is not reflected in the other requirements and poses some additional requirements as well. So this was what we did for the first year, and I will show at the end how we proceeded from these requirements. So now I'm changing the slides. I hope it works for everybody to the iteration number 2. You should see slide 6 now. So for the second year, we were focusing on the use-based requirements. This was exactly the time when the EASA opinion on the regulatory framework for use-based was published. And mainly from this document and the annex to this document, we derived use-based requirements, which were the use-based services and other general high-level requirements, for example, occurrence reporting. So this was the second step, what we included in our database. And in the final and third step, in the third iteration, the focus was on this special condition for light UAS. And the input here was, of course, a special condition, and also from EASA coming already a set of identified requirements, let's say, and even some correlation with the OSOs from the SORA requirements. So here we included another set of requirements into this huge document, let's say. It's here divided per subpart, and each paragraph more or less was included as one requirement, giving us 50 more requirements for the overall document. Okay, now to do really a correlation between the standards that we have in this database and the requirements that we included, we did what we call the mapping. So we drew a first rough connection between these standards by going through each of the standards and saying what might be applicable to which requirement on a very high level, we have to say. So this was also the first step for what is coming with the next presentation that will be shown by Tom. And through this step, we just looked at the general data of each standard, saying, might it be a suitable AMC for any requirement? If this was the case, we just marked it in the document by these crosses shown here. So this is more or less the input for the next upcoming steps for the final assessment. Now I show you what it looks like in reality. So this is the real table. It's even minimized in some parts. So SORA and use base is not shown here, but minimized. And this is only the SC Light UAS that you can see. And we have a huge amount of standards in this document. So it's more than 650 standards actually. And through this 3-year project, we iterated the document as well. So we updated these standards continuously each year. And so why did we do this? Of course, for the assessment as a next step, to have first filtering and an input for the final assessment. And the second thing is the open repository that will be shown by Damiano later on. So you can find all this information. You can find the document itself via the project website, or you can also find all this information in the open repository that Damiano is going to show you. Okay, that's it from my side, and I will hand over to Tom, who will then show the final assessment.
Okay, thank you, Sebastian. Will you give me the screen, Damiano?
Yes, 1 second, please.
I did it, Damiano.
Okay, you did it.
Yes.
Can you see my screen now?
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Yes, you can?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, welcome everybody. My name is Tom van Birgelen from NLR, and I am going to explain to you how we did the assessment of the standards that were just identified in the previous presentation. The first thing we did, wait, let me just remove this one a little bit. The first thing we did was to identify the coverage of requirements by a standard. So for each requirement, we assessed how effective they were in covering the requirement. And there were three outcomes. That the first one is, of course, that you have a full coverage. The second one is that it only partially covers a requirement, and you also have that it does not cover a requirement. Then the second thing we did is to rank the requirements, to rank the standards per requirement. And for this we used 5 criteria. The maturity of the standard, and that means whether it is in drafting or internal consultation, external consultation, published or already used in practice. The second criterion was whether it is information or guidance, or whether it is best practice, or whether it is a real standard specification. The third one was the cost of compliance, which goes from very high to very low. Fourth one, environmental impact, which could be bad, neutral, or good. And then finally, the fifth one, the impact on EU industry competitiveness, which goes from very negative to very positive. Well, each criterion has a scoring system going from -2, which is effectively very bad, to +2, which is very good, and also a weight factor. And the weight factors, they are indicated in the first column next to the criterion. So for example, the maturity of standard has a weight factor 2, and the type of standard has a weight factor 1. And what we did, we added them all up, all the scores, and that gives you a total score for each standard. And depending on this total score, we draw a conclusion. When the score is above 10, then apparently the standard is very good, and then the standard is recommended as a preferred AMC. When the score is between 0 and 10, then we more or less suggest the standard as a possible AMC, subject to decision by the authority. When the standard is below 0, then clearly the standard is not good enough. Then we recommend the amendment of the standard, or we recommend to try to identify standards from other, let's say, industry segments, or for manned aviation. Then for standards that are not fully covered by for requirements that are not fully covered by existing standards, so when there is no coverage or when there's only partial coverage, we have identified the gaps in terms of coverage or non-coverage, and each gap has been assessed using criteria. And these criteria are: what is the safety impact of not having a standard? That can be a very high impact to a very low impact. Then what is the cost of compliance to the requirement without a lack of a standard, which again can be very high cost until very low cost. Another criterion: what is the environmental impact of not having a standard? This impact can be bad, neutral, or good. And finally, what is the impact on EU industry competitiveness of not having a standard, which can be very negative until very positive. Again, each criterion has a weight factor. In case of the safety impact, as you can see in the first column, it is 3. In case of cost of compliance, it is 2. Environmental impact has 1. And the impact on EU industry competitiveness also has a weight factor of 1. all these scores have been added to get a total gap score. And with this total gap score, we use this total gap score to provide recommendations. So when this total gap score is above 0, then the gap is effectively not significant. So there's no need to do anything. It's just acceptable as it is. When it is below 0, then well, the same as the previous case, we recommend to develop a suitable standard, or we recommend that applicable standards for manned aviation regulations or other industry are studied. Then 2 final remarks. AW drones did not address the technical quality of the individual standards. It was assumed that each standard was adequate to fulfill the scope for which it was developed. So we did not really look into the, let's say, the quality of a standard. We just looked at the content. And then the final remark is that we did not have full access to all standards at the time of the assessment. There were some standards for which we had only a preliminary, let's say, version available. So in those cases, full assessments could not be done, and some standards were not available at all. So we did, of course, our best, but some standards could not be assessed. That was the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tom, and thank you very much, Sebastian, for this interesting presentation. I know it was hard to condense in such a brief presentation a lot of years of work, and I would like to thank you as well as the other partners for the hard work done in these years. And now it is a turn to talk about the final outcomes, so the final results of the assessment of the standards and the gaps. So I would like to leave the floor to Matteo Natale from EUROUSC-Italia. Matteo, do you confirm that you are able to project? Yes, perfect.
Yes, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great, so thank you very much. And thank you, Tom. Good morning, everyone. My name is Matteo Natale. I am the Safety and Compliance Engineer for EuroUSC-Italia. In this presentation, we are looking at the outcomes of the project, which ultimately are yielded from the work package 4 of the project, which has been named the proposed standards. This project work package concerns the assessment of the standards identified within the previous one, which has been presented by Sebastian and Tom, and hence the possible recommendation of those standards which are deemed adequate to cover a given requirement. Of course, when talking about SORA, in this presentation, the term requirement will be used to indicate a means to comply with a mitigation or a safety objective due to the fact that SORA is an acceptable means of compliance. Brief recap, the assessments of the work package were conducted iteratively throughout the project with the aim to constantly update the recommended standards as new ones were introduced by standard development organizations over the years, and also the maturity of existing ones is constantly changing and will be doing so as most of these standards are still under development. So as it was mentioned previously, the first iteration of the project in year 1 just considers standards to support the specific operations risk assessment, the SORA methodology. In addition, the second year also involved the assessment of standards in compliance to use-based services, as well as the second iteration of the SORA standards. And finally, in the third year and third iteration, also covered standards supporting the special condition like UAS, as well as the second iteration of use-based and the third iteration of SORA. As mentioned previously, again, in each of the iterations, so whether it be for SORA, for U-Space, or for the special condition, a multi-criteria analysis was employed to assess each standard, and based on the final score yielded by the multi-criteria analysis, a standard could either be recommended or give rise to gaps if the requirement was not fully covered. So the multi-criteria analysis for the assessment took the following criteria under consideration: effectiveness to fulfill the SORA or requirement or use-based service, and then maturity, type of standard, cost of compliance, environmental impact, and impact on new industry competitiveness. I'm repeating this just to say that the first criterion, the effectiveness to fulfill the requirement, which initially held the greatest weight and hence impacted the score the most, has been removed in the third iteration from the multi-criteria analysis. And this was done to allow the scores of standards not to be impacted by limitations. So, for example, standards providing full coverage, but only to a certain configuration of UAS or maximum takeoff mass. And then again, any gaps arisen from a partial or no coverage of a requirement was subsequently assessed analogously to the standards assessment, so with a multi-criteria analysis. Okay, so let's dive into an example now. So the following slides will introduce an example of assessed standards for a SORA case, a use-space case, and a special condition case. So when it comes to SORA, for the SORA case, the example on screen considers operational safety objective 9, 15, and 22, which is remote crew training. The tables depicted here on screen are taken from Annex E to AMC 1 to Article 11 of Regulation 947 of 2019, and they are therefore effectively the requirements for operational safety objective 9, 15, and 22, as described by the integrity and assurance. So before I proceed, for anyone who doesn't know, within SORA, the integrity is the safety gain provided by each mitigation, and the assurance is the level of evidence that the claimed safety gain has been achieved. So when it comes to showing compliance with a standard to this requirement, to operational safety objective 9, 15, and 22, we have to have that the competency-based theoretical and practical training is to be adequate for the operation, ensuring knowledge of all the elements that you see on screen. So UAS regulation, airspace operating principles, airmanship, aviation and safety, human performance limitation, meteorology, and so on. Let's dive in deeper to the example. So the two standards that you see on screen are only two of the standards which have been assessed against this requirement, and they are ISO 23665, unmanned aircraft systems, training for personnel involved in UAS operations, as well as the JARA's recommendations for remote pilot competency. Both of these standards provide a partial coverage, scoring a total of +8, because they are published standards, so their maturity, referring to the multi-criteria analysis, their maturity is quite high, with a relatively low cost of compliance, a positive environmental impact, and a neutral impact on the EU industry competitiveness. So hence scoring a total of +8. This means that both standards can be recommended. However, both have some gaps, both present some gaps. We have identified these and also assessed these accordingly, as mentioned by Tom previously. And the gaps that we have found are the lack of standards covering training requirements for personnel other than the remote pilot in charge of duties essential to the management of the flight, such as, for example, the visual observer. And then the lack of standards covering training requirements for non-regulated professions, such as, for example, a payload operator. We can derive some conclusions from this assessment, and that is that this operational safety objective, so remote crew training, is completely covered, however, only for the remote pilot. The first gap that we have identified does have graver implications on safety, and therefore scores after the assessment of the gap a total of -7. This means that we do recommend actions to be taken in order to cover this gap, as I said, it does have quite a high impact on safety. The second gap scores a total of +6, as its impact on safety is not as relevant as the former. And therefore, we do not recommend to take immediate action to cover this gap. We also know, however, that these gaps could be covered by the next iterations of the ISO document. Okay, so this was just one example of an assessed requirement. And the following conclusions stem from the rest of the assessments for the SORA iterations. We can conclude that most SORA requirements are at least partially covered by published standards. There are some exceptions for which we do not currently recommend any standards, and these are Operational Safety Objective 13, External Services Supporting US Operations, on which, however, EUROCAI Working Group 105, Subgroup 62 is working on. Operational Safety Objective 18, Automatic Protection of the Flight Envelope from Human Errors, for which EUROCAI Working Group 105 should close the gap. And then Operational Safety Objective 16, Multi-Crew Coordination, which is currently not covered by any published standards. As I said previously, some of the requirements are fully covered. However, they do present some limitations. That is, for example, limited maximum takeoff mass and a limited configuration. So, for example, a standard could cover a requirement, but only being applicable to drones up to, say, 25 kilograms, or only for a fixed wing configuration or a multi-rotor configuration. For all of the SORA mitigations and operational safety objectives, we have identified roughly 40 gaps currently. Some of these gaps will be covered by improved maturity of standards in the upcoming years. Many of the standards are still ongoing, and some are only just planned. And some of these gaps will also be solved by EASA's, by the AMCs within EASA's NPA of September 2021, such as, for example, Mitigation M3, the Emergency Response Plan, and then the criteria on operational procedures of Operational Safety Objectives 8, 16, and 19, and then mitigations M1 and M2. Okay, let's now look at an example of the assessment for a use-based case. So, as I said, the second and third iterations of the project also featured the assessment of standards in compliance to use-based services, as taken from Commission Implementing Regulation 664 of 2021. And these are the Network Identification Service, which provides the identity of UAS operators and location of UAS during operations, and then share relevant information with other use-based airspace users. The Geo-Awareness Service, which provides UAS operators with the information about the latest airspace constraints and defined UAS geographical zones. The Flight Authorization Service ensures that authorized UAS operations are free of intersection in space and time with any other notified flight authorizations within the same use-based airspace. The Traffic Information Service, which alerts UAS operators about other air traffic that may be present in proximity of their UAS. The Weather Information Service, supporting the UAS operator during the flight planning and execution phases. And then finally, the Conformance Monitoring Service, which provides real-time alerting of non-conformance with the granted flight authorization and informs the UAS of operators of the UAS operators when deviating from it. Okay, so in this case, for this example, the Network Identification Service was taken as an example, which says that the service shall allow the continuous processing of the remote identification of the UAS throughout the whole duration of the flight, and shall provide the remote identification of the UAS to authorized users in an aggregated manner. Two of the standards that we have identified and assessed are ASTM F3411-19, US Remote Identification and Tracking, which provides a partial coverage and a score of +10, so which can be recommended. And then the ASD STAN 4709-002 direct remote identification standard, which again provides a partial coverage due to the fact that direct remote identification is covered while not fully covering the NIS, and then scoring a total of +8. So while this requirement is not fully covered, we know that ASTM is working with EUROCAI to address a global standard for a network identification service. This effort is also coordinated by ISO Technical Committee 20, Subcommittee 16, which is also developing a global standard on remote identification of UAS, which is ISO 23629-8, which is still ongoing. Conclusion we can derive from the standards of the use-based, the assessment of use-based services, the standards, applicable to use-based services, are that all services are only partially covered. This is mainly due to the fact that the selected standards only fit a particular part of a service. One example is EUROCAI ED269, which covers data format for geozones as part of the geo-awareness service. So what this means is that we do not have a single standard covering each of these services. Another reason behind this is that most standards have not been published yet, so they are not, their maturity is not, is quite low. However, EUROCAI, ISO, ASTM, and ASD stands are actively working, as I said, on the development of new standards covering use-based services. Let's now move on to the final example, the one of involving the special condition light UAS, as introduced within the third iteration of the project. I have chosen one requirement just to illustrate how the assessment was conducted. As you know, the special condition does have plenty of requirements. So the one we have proposed here on screen is light UAS 2625, instructions for continued airworthiness. Two of the standards that were assessed are the ASTM F2909-19, standard practice for maintenance and continued airworthiness of small unmanned aircraft systems, which provides a full coverage of the requirement, scoring a total of +6, and then ASTM F3366-19, standard specification for general maintenance manual for small UAS, which again, supports the previous standard and covers maintenance manuals, and again scores a total of +6. Now, in theory, these standards have a limitation, as they are only applicable to drones of up to 25 kilograms. Their applicability, however, could be extended, and however, this would require an in-depth technical review of the standard, which is obviously out of the scope of the project. The conclusions, again, that we can derive from the assessment of the special conditions are that, well, for instance, initially, that the applicability of standards to the special condition requirements is aligned with the corresponding SOAR operational safety objectives and mitigations related to the technical design. And we have identified one standard, ASTM F3298-19, standard specification for design, construction, and verification of lightweight unmanned aircraft systems, which can serve as a baseline document for the requirements. However, this must be complemented by specific standards to cover the individual requirements. For example, this is the case with EUROCAI ED 280, guidelines for UAS safety analysis for the specific category, which covers light UAS 2510 equipment systems and installation. And it is also the case with ASTM F3002, standard specification for design of the command and control system for small unmanned aircraft systems, which can go to complement the former standard when it comes to requirement light UAS 2575, command, control, and communication contingency. Finally, the main gaps that we have identified in the assessment of the special condition requirements are related mainly to subpart C, which is relates to structures, as test loads and targets still need to be defined. Subpart E lift thrust power systems, as there's a lack of standards for engine design. And then finally, subpart F, equipment, as there's a lack of standards for environmental protection of the ground control station. Okay, so in conclusion, the final outcomes of the project will be delivered in a final deliverable in mid-December. And this will be complete of all the assessments and recommended standards. These will be also uploaded and updated within the project's drone standard portal, or the meta standard, as Marco mentioned before, which can be accessed via the link on screen, standards.awdrones.eu. Thank you for your attention. Damiano, back to you.
Thank you very much, Matteo, and thank you for this presentation. And now we are starting to go really into the details of what we did, what we delivered with this project. As already said a number of times, these results are and will be openly available. We have a spirit of full collaboration and sharing of data, and the good thing is, said by Marco, you don't need to go into a huge number of documents, because at least we will wrap this data and put them in the portal that will be the subject of the very last presentation. So thank you once again, Matteo. And now I would like to leave the floor to Peter from Blyenburgh, that will show us the results of another very important activity of the project, because as said by Marco at the beginning, and then we saw that the main stakeholders, let's say, of this work were mainly the EASA and also partly the Standard Development Organization, but we have another very important voice to be heard, that is the voice of the operators and of the market. So Peter, let's talk and tell us about the online service that we did during the project to collect some feedback from the market and the operators. Peter, you are now you have the rights to present. So
there we go.
Yes.
Do you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
Now, show my screen. Screen 1. Do you see my presentation?
Yes, it's still a bit tiny. Maybe you can put it full screen for us.
How's that?
Yes, more or less. Almost there.
Okay, what I can do is I can go to this, to the PowerPoint. How's that?
It's better, thank you. Thank you very much, Peter.
Not at all. So we conducted these 3 surveys within the context of AW drones. I'd like to point out that they were not done only in English. They were done in English, French, German, and Spanish to be able to maximize the inputs from operators, because not all of them speak fluent English. The objective here on the first one, so we're taking UAS ops and ops risk. They were joined together but separate, so they were in tandem. We wanted to evaluate the current situation and the near future situation, meaning 1 to 2 years. Look at the market sectors, the mission purposes in both cases, and obtain initial feedback on the use of SORA, standard scenarios, predefined risk assessment, and qualify the respondents, because not all of them we evaluated from the beginning could participate with valid information on the ops risk survey. So we had to define what the operator was, what types of operations there were. This was purely for operators. The types of operators that we identified from the beginning, you see here. As you can see also, practically all of them, except one, actually participated in the survey. Now, the explanations of what is behind all of this was also supplied in English, French, German, and Spanish. Then we had to define the market sectors in which these operators were working. This is what we came up with. And each of these market sectors participated in the survey. Then we had to define the mission purposes. This again is what we came up with. And each of these mission purposes was selected by at least one of the respondents. And the explanations behind all of this were again available in English, French, German, and Spanish to make it very clear to everybody what we're talking about. Now, at this point, I think, Damiano, that we should call our consortium the consortium of the mega Excel forms, because you had an unbelievable Excel form with your standards. This survey had 2,214 columns in its Excel form. So you're probably bigger than we are. The methodology that we used was to have the respondents identify themselves as commercial or non-commercial operators, and then identify the type of operator. They had 10 choices of each. Then they were split, the replies were split into current and near future. And the initial feedback on the SORA use made it possible to go to detailed feedback on SORA use in the ops risk survey, which was separate. This is an overview of who participated. So we had 247 respondents on the US ops survey, and only 20 on the ops risk. So that clearly indicates that when we're talking about SORA, there weren't that many that could actually understand it and participate in it. The replies principally came from France. It was far in the lead in the quantity of respondents, followed by Belgium and Germany on the same level, which is rather strange. And then the Netherlands, Spain, and as you can see, it became smaller afterwards. 76% were commercial operators and 24 non-commercial, which is a quite interesting number. The corporate entities were 88%. Government entities, research organizations, all and associations and academia was much smaller. So we were really addressing the guys in the field. The numbers that came out that you see there, the comprehension and use of SORA, those relate or bring out something which is not really clear for me, because there weren't that many that could really understand all the intricacies of SORA. This is a layout of the final report where all the details are available. At the end of the presentation, you'll get the website where you can download all of this. And I encourage you all to take a look at it and get the documents, because there's much too much to explain on a short 20 minutes speech. Then we go to the U-Space Insight survey. Again, in English, French, German, and Spanish. And the objective here was to get a perception of the market on what U-Space means for the operators and where they see the gaps. Here we had 120 respondents from 28 countries. The principal contributing countries represented nearly 72% of all contributions received. And in the yellow box, you'll see in order of importance, the 8 top responding countries. I should like to indicate also that there were a number of countries outside of Europe that participated. As you can see, the United States, New Zealand, Kenya, Jamaica, China, Australia. Now here you see the participant categories. Those are the 20 that you see indicated. And you see their current activities in percentages and their future activities. The arrows indicate where growth will take place. The top 3 respondent categories are UAS operators, consultancies specialized in safety risk assessment, and UAS manufacturers, integrator, and operators. Here you see I've tried to indicate the quality, the qualifications, and the sector involvement in the survey. It's interesting to remark that the majority have more than 5 years experience with drones, and the people who replied for the organizations, 33% of them had involvement with drones for more than 10 years. And 66% had personal involvement with aviation for more than 10 years. The respondents' involvement with standards, what stands out here, that's on the left-hand side, is 49% involved with EUROCONTROL, 37 with ASTM, and 29 with national organizations, standards organizations. The number of countries for non-European or for EU associated in 17 EU countries and 7 others. Very interestingly enough, 70% of the respondents were micro companies and SMEs. However, when you look at the quantity of employees, you have 30% that had 251 or more employees. And strangely enough here, 67% replied in English. However, what isn't really clear from the survey is that if we had done it only in English, would we have missed the 33% represented by German, French, and Spanish? That's not clear. The general comprehension of U-Space, you see here that the above average comprehension in all cases, or in the first 2, was below 50%. The partial comprehension was also below 50% on the various questions indicated there. So it's not a total comprehension at all. Now, out of the respondents, 40% of the positive replies are indicated here. And you see the services that are currently available in the respondents' countries. This is quite interesting because it's a preference, an expression of needs of more than 50% of the respondents. And it's very clear that integration is much preferable to segregation. There's also a need for further specifications of rules and guidelines in the U-Space regulation. 64% indicated that clarification of the roles and responsibilities of ANSPs, common information service providers, and U-Space service providers was desired. The maturity of the comprehension. U-Space is clearly not mature. It's obvious for everybody. But it was also very clear that the information currently available is insufficient. Above average in total comprehension of the U-Space concept stands at 74%, which in my opinion is not really comprehensible in relation to the other numbers that we've obtained. The most urgently required services are indicated in order of importance on the right-hand side. And what stands out above all is flight authorization request processing at nearly 60%. But what is really interesting also is what is mentioned at the bottom here, is that the majority of the respondents, more than 50%, do not know when the required services will be available in their countries. 50% of the respondents indicated that the top box, everything that's mentioned there, was still missing. And less than 50% indicated what is indicated below in the lower box, that is still missing. Immature and non-existent technology and principal required standards. I don't think there are many surprises there for anybody, but at the top of the list, again, comes out detect and avoid. Expressions expressed on the current situation. U-Space information. 59% indicated that it was insufficient to evaluate the impact on their future activities. Regulatory information was sufficient to evaluate the impact on future activities. Well, you can read all of this. The numbers are not high enough, which means that the comprehension out there is not really sufficient yet, seen from a market point of view. Now, this is interesting when you look at the expressions expressed on standards. More than 50% of the respondents wanted to be involved with creating the standards, producing the standards for data exchange standards, remote identification standards, and electronic registration standards. The general comments that are indicated here show that the national organizations are not really involved with the ASD standards. Only 21% say that they are. But you also see that the no answer to the questions here is the majority, and that in most cases, the yes answers are well below 33%, 1/3 of the respondents. I have not been able to bring this down into one slide, but all the standards that are indicated here, we have replies country by country if these standards are available or not in the 28 countries that replied. The respondents suggested that the following standards should be considered. There is much more detail in the actual survey itself. Additional standards that were suggested by respondents are indicated here. And again, the quantities and the countries are indicated in the survey. Now, this was an interesting one. ISO is evaluating the interest of starting work. In some cases, they might have already started it on the standards indicated here. And all the respondents were asked to evaluate if they thought these standards should be addressed or not. They were given 3 options: yes, no, or no opinion. But what is surprising is that quite a few of these standards are actually considered to be of value. Geozones and e-registration. Here we see quite a number of yeses. To all the first 2 questions have more than 60% yes. But what is also very surprising is that you have a significant number of people who do not know. 80% of the respondents indicated that e-registration is now available in their country. This might have grown since we ended the survey. 61% indicated that e-registration is free of charge in their country. And the minimum age is principally between 16 and 18 years. However, there are exceptions in France, Italy, Spain. They have 3 classes. Denmark has 2 classes, and Germany has 2 classes. The responsibility for the management of geo-zones and geo-awareness service provision was also replied to. The numbers are indicated here. It is very clear that the majority are national aviation authorities. But what is also very interesting is that the majority of the respondents indicated that a geo-awareness service provider should have a designated accountable geo-awareness manager, which, as far as I know, is not the case anywhere yet. This is the layout of the final report, and here are the links to getting all of these survey results. You can see that the UAS Ops and the Ops Risk has already been downloaded by 651 persons, and the USpace Insight Survey by 282. You can get them in flipbook format if you want to flip through them before downloading them. Otherwise, the links are indicated in the dark blue boxes. That's all for me, Damiano.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Peter. A lot of data and very interesting ones. I would like to highlight once again that all of this material is available for a free download on both the website of Blyenburgh Co and rpsinfo.com and on the AW Drones website. So if you are interested in the full report, don't hesitate to click on the websites and download the report. Okay, so following the agenda, we are now going towards our last presentation. That is actually my presentation. I will tell you a few words about the next steps of the project, and finally I will give you also more information about the portal, the information portal, or open repository, as we call it sometimes during the presentations. Okay, so first of all, please confirm that you can see my screen.
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Okay. So this very last presentation is about the drone standards information portal and the future actions for the project. Okay, what is this drone information portal? We sometimes called it during the presentations open portal. We called it the repository, but in any case, this is it. It's the drone standard information portal. It is actually the database, the online repository that provides the single point access to the information that you saw during the previous presentation. So if you click in the link, you will reach this website where you can see the information about the rules, the procedures, and the technical standards that have been developed for mass market drone. Okay, this mass market is the word that was identified at the very beginning, the scope of the project. We have seen during all this presentation that this definition does not fully apply anymore. We left it because it was the original scope of the project. It contains also best practices, the gaps, as Matteo and previously Sebastian and Tom showed, and the bottlenecks, so the challenges for the standards. You will find there for sure the technical standards for each category of drone operation. And these data are hopefully communicated in this single point and user-friendly web platform, which can be accessed freely and publicly by any type of user. Okay, now I will switch to the browser. Please confirm that you can see now the portal on the screen. Vera, do you see the portal?
Yes, yes.
Perfect. Okay, this is the landing page of the portal. When you reach the portal, you arrive here. That's this test describing the project and describing why we decided to publish this portal and so on. Then there is a list of potential users. Okay, we have included here some target groups, as we call them. So a number of potential stakeholders that may be interested in this portal, but the list doesn't want to be exhaustive, but it's more a collection of potential stakeholders that may be interested. There is this warning because some of the data are not yet fully validated, and there is the advice that the full text, integral text of the standard will not be for sure included within the database, but it can be downloaded from the SDO website. And okay, this is there is no official, let's say, endorsement by EASA on the mapping between standards and regulatory requirements. This is exactly in line with what we said in the previous presentation. When you click here, you get finally into the system. Okay, this is the version of the portal that is currently online that you will reach with this URL. After this very brief tour of the current portal, I will show you some news about the 2.0 version of the portal that is going to be released in the next weeks. But for the moment, let's focus on what is currently online and working on the website. Here you have a number of options to explore the database, the repository. On the left side, you have some filters, okay? You can filter all the huge database. You can see that now we have, up to now, we have 670 standards in the database. You can reach them by filtering for domain or keywords, as we identified also here. So these are general domains, and these are keywords that give you some dimensions to explore this huge database. But on the other side, most important, you can filter them out by regulatory requirement. So you can find here the requirements of SORA expressed with this also word, and the requirements of the EU-space regulation. So let's make an example. If you are interested in the standards that are currently covering also 4, following our assessment, okay, you apply the filter of the standard, and you can find here the list of the standards that we associated with this specific also during the assessment. If you click here, you will go to the page of the specific standard with its description, some details about the status of the document, who issued the document, what is the domain and the keywords, and the requirements to which this specific standard, that in this case is the CS rules, have been mapped to during the project. So this is basically what you saw in Matteo's presentation, but in a graphical representation here. For example, here you can see that these specific standards have been associated with also 4, but with no sufficient coverage of the OSO. But while for the OSO 18, you see that we said after the analysis that this standard is able to cover at least partially the medium level of robustness associated with the OSO 18. Here you can see this amber means that this level of robustness was outside of the scope of the assessment. And then here you can see the gaps and the comment associated with the specific assessment. And you can do the same with also all the other requirements. For example, if you go to the EU-space requirement, you can see that we associated with this very specific service of EU-space, that is the network identification service, we are associated these specific standards. And once again, you can click on them and reach the page where these are associated with the different services. As you can see here, there are for sure some standards that are associated to different requirements. They may be both SORA and EU-space. Okay, now I don't want to go too much more into the details of the current version of the portal, because you can easily access it by yourself, make a tour, look at it, and then if you wish, you can also give us some feedback and send an email. At the end, I will send you the correct reference to send comments and needs and so on. Okay, so that's it more or less with the current version of the information portal. What's going on? The fresh news is that we are now preparing a renewed version of the portal. It will have new functionalities and a brand new graphical identity, and hopefully better search tools, and is going to be released at the end of 2021 or the beginning of 2022. Okay, the official release, the formal deliverable of the website is at the end of this year. With the end of the project, maybe the official launch will be shifted a bit, but during January 2022 it will be fully functional and online. This is a flavor of how the first landing page of the portal will be, and we have also developed a new logo for the portal that is going to be placed on the top of the page. What's new in this new portal? That's a better user support, and finally we will have also full user manual available for the visitors. So when you connect to the portal, you will be able to download a user manual and to consult a user manual. There is a full brand new graphical identity that is responsive, so you can use it on mobile, on different browsers and so on. There is a change in the architecture of the information, because we decided after some feedback we got that the best thing to do was to create 3 different sections. One is for SORA, one is for U-Space, and one is for the special condition like UAS, following the scope of the project. For sure, if there are standards that cover transversal aspects of different sections, let's say, it will be clearly highlighted on the portal. And hopefully the access to information will be easier for the user. There are more intuitive search fields, and we designed it in a way that you need less clicks to reach your final information. For example, the very specific standard that you are looking for. The portal is a live creature, so it is driven by the needs of the users. So as soon as we will put it online, we will also give you the way to give us comments and to share your impressions with the team. And this brings us to what's going on with the full project. So AEW drones will officially end this year at New Year's Eve on the 31st of December, but there are still a lot of things that are ongoing, and those include the finalization of the last outcomes and deliverables. Those are very important. They will include also the report on this final event, but it will include also the deliverable 4.3, that is the very last collection of all the assessment we made. So there are some important documents that we will still we are preparing and that we'll deliver by the end of the project. There is the new information portal, very important, a number of questions about this. The information portal and also the project website will be for sure maintained after the end of the project. So the AEW drones project will remain online with all the info and all the deliverables and so on for at least 2 years. And the same is for the drone standard information portal. It will stay online. We are now putting together a sustainability plan, business plan, to keep it live and to keep it working for a long period. So don't hesitate to use the portal and to give comments, because we are planning for sure to keep it alive for a long time. So it will definitely survive the end of the project. At the same time, we are planning to make the information portal more interactive. It means that at the end it will become an interactive platform to collect your contribution. So the portal users at the end will be allowed to collaborate and to put in their information in form of comments, ratings, and also proposal for new standards and so on. So keep in touch, because the journey of the project is finally coming to its end. but there is still a lot of work to do with drone standards. We have seen today that there are a lot of hot topics and there is still a lot of interest. If we are still more than 100 people here after 4 hours of presentation, it means that at least there is some interest on the topic. That's all from our side. Once again, I kindly ask to the experts to look for the questions. Maybe there are 2 or 3 still remaining pending. So I would like to thank all the participants very much. I would like to thank the project consortium, the project officer, and all the guests and the speakers that gave us very interesting feedbacks today. Before leaving, I would like to initiate a very simple and very last interactive session with the participants. These are 2 questions that we would like to pose you. Maybe Christos has something to say. Yes. Okay. We cannot hear you, Christos. Is your microphone muted? I don't know. Okay. In any case, we would like to share these questions. The first one is very simple, and we would like to ask you if after all these presentations, after you saw our outcomes and so on, we would like to ask you whether we reached our objectives or not. We know this is a closed question, so it is not so easy to answer, but in any case, if you have any more structured feedback, in particular, if you think that we have not reached the objectives, please don't hesitate to write on the chat or even send us emails after the end of this event. I see in any case that most of you think that the project reached to what extent its objectives, and this is very good to know. I'm sure that some of you will share their opinion with us even after the end of this event. We would like very much to know more about your impressions of the project. Okay, I don't think I can share the screen with the results, and they will be in any case published on the website, but just to let you know, up to now almost 70% of the participants have already voted, and we have a 73% of yes, likely a 0% of no, and a 29% of not sure. And this is very nice to see that there are some doubts, and it's interesting if you want to share that with us after this event. Okay, very good. Okay, more than 70% of people have voted, so in 10 seconds I'm going to close the poll. Thank you very much for your very useful feedback. Okay, thank you very much. And now the very final question. This is very interesting for us because we want to know from you whether you will make use or not of what you learned here. So, do you think that you will use the results of the project, the outcomes of the project? Okay, very good. Just to let you know, we have 80% of people saying that they will use the drone standard information portal, and this is very, very good. And there is also 56% saying that they will use the list of recommended standards, while the surveys will be useful to more or less 35% of the participants. That is still a very good result. Okay, in a few seconds I'm going to close. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. We will publish the results, but just for your knowledge, it's 58% we use the list of recommended standards, 78% the drone standard information portal, and 33% will use the service on of the operators. Okay, very good. I'm just looking whether we have open questions. Yes, not so many. Okay, maybe Christos wants to say something, but I don't know whether we can hear him. Christos, are you? We see your microphone is green, but we cannot hear you, unfortunately.
You cannot hear me?
Yes, now yes. Now it's
now
working.
yes. Okay, I just want to say a few words to thank everybody who participated in this event, to congratulate the speakers for excellent presentations. I was really impressed, and is yet another proof how much concentration of knowledge and experience and expertise there is in Europe, because mostly the speakers are European. Is yet, to my opinion, another proof that Europe is leading the way in airspace matters, in aviation matters. I think this is something that it should make us both as professionals, as European citizens. With these few words, again, I'd like to thank everybody, and in particular, Deep Blue personnel who have done an excellent work. I'm sorry I could not help you very much in organizing this event. You practically have done everything, although it was my job. But I told you from the outset that you are so efficient, you are so hardworking, you are so beautiful that I left it to you. That is the reason I left it to you. Thank you again. Congratulations to everybody, and hope we see you very soon.
Thank you, Christos. And very last remark, Vera made me notice that there are some raised hands. Unfortunately, I said at the beginning we cannot leave the participant say any word because we are going to close in 1 minute. But we will be very glad if you want to share any opinion with us even after the end of this event. Please send an email to me, to Vera, to Christos, or whoever. You have all the links and references to reach us. So thank you once again. A special thank to Vera that made this possible with a lot of work behind the curtain. And okay. Thank you, and thank you, Christos, and all the others. And let's keep in touch, because I said the project is finished, but we will leave hopefully a huge legacy to the community, a lot of data, a lot of information, and the portal will stand alive and so on. I don't know whether Marco has something else to add, or otherwise we can close the meeting now. Okay, and thank you very much for giving us this time of yours, and bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. Goodbye, everybody. Enjoy.